think the worst thing for me, standing here, is that it could happen today.
Oh, God.
I agree.
Yeah.
I can see people being marched out of Kiev and shot
Marilyn.
by some people who would decide that's the thing to do.
That's right.
Maybe they do it to gays. Maybe they do it to
That's why we have to
Russia,
support Israel.
whatever.
Israel's our insurance policy.
Although Zionism typically represents itself as the solution to anti-Semitism, the truth is less flattering. In fact, hostility towards Jews is indispensable to the cause of Jewish nationalism. If anti-Semitism didn't exist, Zionists would have to invent it, and in many cases, that is precisely what they've done. Contrary to the widespread perception that Zionism opposes anti-Semitism, its adherents have occasionally revealed a more ambivalent attitude to Jew hatred. In 1895, Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, prophetically wrote in his diaries, "Anti-Semites will become our surest friends, anti-Semitic countries our allies." Even the suffering inflicted on European Jewry by the Nazi Holocaust doesn't seem to have unduly tempered such cynicism. In 1995, Jay Lefkowitz, an American government official, told the New York Times magazine, "Deep down, I believe that a little anti-Semitism is a good thing for the Jews, reminds them of who they are." If Zionist extremists can't provoke the desired level of anti-Semitism to advance their goals, they're even prepared to fake it. A 1952 article in Davar, the official organ of Mapai, the party of then-Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, suggested sending a team of saboteurs to help redeem Jews from the countries where they are absorbed in sinful self-satisfaction. The task of these young men, the article explained, would be to disguise themselves as non-Jews, plague these Jews with anti-Semitic slogans such as "Bloody Jew," "Jews go to Palestine," and similar intimacies. Lest anyone doubt that the Israeli government would ever contemplate carrying out such a cynical plot to encourage Jews to move to Israel, the rescue of about 125,000 Iraqi Jews in the early 1950s involved far worse acts. In attempts to portray the Iraqis as anti-American and to terrorize the Jews, wrote former CIA officer Wilbur Eveland in Ropes of Sand, the Zionists planted bombs in the U.S. Information Service Library and in synagogues. Soon, leaflets began to appear urging Jews to flee to Israel. Whatever about posing as Arab anti-Semites, one might think that Zionists would draw the line at a post-Holocaust sponsorship of Nazism. Yet this is exactly what a leading Canadian Zionist organization has been accused of. In the 1960s, the Canadian Jewish Congress, the CJC, paid John Garrity, a small-time mercenary, to build up the fledgling Canadian Nazi Party, reveals Ezra Levant in Shakedown. When the embarrassing truth emerged, it was justified by the CJC as an attempt to learn more about neo-Nazism. However, the real purpose, according to the Jewish Canadian writer, was to provide a pretext for the addition of hate laws to the criminal code. While hate sounds like something that all decent people would condemn, one man's hate may be another man's righteous indignation. Zionists, for example, tend to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and, therefore, as something that could be considered a hate crime.
Anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism almost entirely overlap. Now, of course, it is very bad to say that you are against the Jews after the Holocaust. So you have found an escape clause to be against the Jews without saying that you are against the Jews, and you say, I am against Israel. The terrorists have allies in European society, in the media, in the NGOs, on academia, among left-wing politicians, in the trade unions.
But are Professors Mearsheimer and Walt engaged in hate propaganda by documenting the harmful influence of the Israel lobby over U.S. foreign policy?
Those arguments that we're making are not anti-Semitic, and we're not anti-Semites. Of course, it's almost impossible to prove that you're not an anti-Semite, which is one reason that this charge is so effective. And how does one say I'm not anti-Semitic and convince people who say you are.
Was former U.S. President Jimmy Carter a bigot for comparing the Israeli occupation of Palestine to apartheid South Africa?
Jimmy Carter has literally become such an anti-Israel bigot that there's a kind of special place in hell reserved for somebody like that.
Are the survivors of the USS Liberty, who refused to remain silent about Israel's deliberate attack on their ship, merely motivated by hatred of Jews?
Prepared to abandon ship. We couldn't even open the hatch up because they were shooting at us so bad. There was no place to go. They shot the life rafts. If we had to go into the water, there would have probably been no survivors.
They are not acknowledged. There's no chapter in American history that talks about what happened to these men, and they want to be recognized in U.S. history for what happened to them, even if it does shine a bad light on how on what Israel did to them, which was blatantly go in there and bomb them for 2 hours.
Is Professor Norman Finkelstein a self-hating Jew for exposing the Holocaust industry's corruption of history and memory in the service of an extortion racket? And is UN Special Rapporteur Richard Falk also self-hating for likening Israel's actions against the besieged Gazans to what the Nazis did to the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto? In each of these cases, by no means an exhaustive list, the charges of anti-Semitism, rather than serving to protect Jewish people from defamation, has been used to obscure Zionist crimes. However, as Zionist criminality becomes increasingly transparent, there will most likely be a sharp rise in anti-Semitism worldwide. No doubt, much of it will be the result of genuine, albeit misdirected, anger as the extent of Zionist crimes against humanity becomes more widely known. But considering Zionism's history of faking attacks on Jews, we can expect at least some of this hate to be the work of Jewish extremists who disingenuously claim to be fighting anti-Semitism.
Anti-Jewish feeling that's very, very dangerous, because there'll be no peace in the Middle East until we uproot racism there, and anti-Semitism is a form of racism. It always has been, but it's particularly virulent today.
Perhaps it's time for those who are genuinely concerned about combating hatred in the world to heed the words of Israel Shahak. As the great Israeli humanist concluded in his classic Jewish history, Jewish Religion, although the struggle against anti-Semitism and of all other forms of racism should never cease, the struggle against Jewish chauvinism and exclusivism is now of equal and greater importance.